This Week in Radio Tech, episode 146, is brought to you by the new Telos HX6 talk show system. 6 lines, POTS or ISDN, and 2 advanced Telos hybrids for clear caller audio and easy conferencing. On the web at telos-systems.com/HX6.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twert. The perfect storm will be here in a week, and how will we be prepared? Well, that's what Keith Smeal and his greater media engineers were asking just before Hurricane Sandy.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Dad?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land,
this is Kirk Harnack.
Keith Smeal with Greater Media New Jersey joins Tom Ray and me for an engineering wrap-up of Hurricane Sandy.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, it's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. So glad you're around with us. We're the show that teaches you all about radio technology, audio, RF. If you're into propeller head geeky stuff like that, how to do internet streaming, how to get audio onto the internet, how to get basically, it's our job to get audio out to a mass audience. And that's what we do in radio, and that's carrying out into other technologies like internet streaming and getting audio into cars, maybe in the future by internet streaming. So we talk about that kind of stuff. I'm the guy who founded the show. I just love doing this. Love to have your comments as well. We do the show every Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on the GFQ network. Let's bring in our co-host, a fellow who's joined me for, my goodness, about 146 shows now. It's Tom Ray from the Hudson Valley of New York. Hey, Tom.
Speaking of someone who's overstayed his welcome, hey Kirk, how you doing tonight? And if we get stuff out to our mass audience, that usually means we're broadcasting a religious show. Anyway, little joke. You're supposed to laugh.
I'm laughing because I think you should keep your day job. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, I probably should.
So Tom, what are you doing for a living nowadays? Because I understand that the powerhouse a legacy station that you have worked for years has been bought, has been sold, and what are you doing with your time?
Well, yeah, it's been sold, but I'm until the sale is final, I work for Buckley Broadcasting, and I am still Director of Engineering at WOR and Director of Engineering of Buckley Broadcasting. So, yeah, I'm still hanging out in my office there. So,
Gotcha. All right.
And fixing things and, whatever.
All right. And you're keeping the transmitter on the air. You had yourself some fun during Hurricane Sandy, and we're going to let you compare notes with our guest here in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and bring in our guest. I'm delighted to have Keith Smeal on with us. Hey, Keith, how you doing?
Good evening. Pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you're able to take an hour out of your day and join us an hour away, maybe away from your family. Hey, Keith, I don't know that I had met you before we got to meet on Skype the other night, but a guy that I know by the name of Smitty, Milford Smith, suggested that I get in touch with you about your heroic efforts at keeping stations on the air, you and your team, during Hurricane Sandy. So that's what we're here to talk about. Good for you.
Well, Smitty's the best. I can't say enough great things about him, and through a lot of his support and his guidance is what helped us stay on the air.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump right into it here. I guess I should mention before we really get going that our show is brought to you by the folks who are also happen to be my employer. I'm delighted that Telos, the Telos Alliance, is a sponsor of this show, This Week in Radio Tech. So if you want to check them out on the web, go to Telos, that's T-E-L-O-S, telosalliance.com, and from there you can get to any of the 4 divisions of the Telos Alliance. So I thank them from the bottom of my heart for being a sponsor on the show. And about halfway through the show, we're going to show you a product that we're just about to start shipping. It's very, very cool. All right, let's get on with it. So hurricanes are a kind of interesting thing. We get advance warning about hurricanes. They are destructive over usually a very large area, concentrated often around the eye, but if there's a lot of rain associated with the hurricane, then there can be a lot of flooding for literally hundreds of miles away from the eye of the hurricane. Unlike a tornado or a flash flood, where we have very little, if any, warning that those things are coming along, or a lightning strike, something that broadcasters deal with all the time. But a hurricane, we got warning. And I'm kind of delving into this because actually I'm a meteorologist myself. And I know something about computer models and what they can predict, and we are getting better and better at predicting the path of hurricanes. And with Hurricane Sandy, we had a situation where we had the hurricane coming up the East Coast, and then we knew it was going to veer into the mainland of the U.S. And about the same time, we were going to get another low pressure system coming in, dropping down from Canada, coming in from the northwest. And these two were going to, if not combine, that's really not the right word, they're going to interact with each other to bring some really strong winds, a lot of precipitation, and general nastiness. And also with high tides occurring at the same time that Sandy was coming ashore, man, we got a lot of water coming into coastal areas along the Northeast. So, Keith, with all that introduction, blah, 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 you guys had some warning. Talk to me about the kind of preparations that a company like Greater Media starts to do for a hurricane like this.
Well, we were watching the models along with everyone else, and early on, Sandy was down in the lower Atlantic, and we were just thinking, well, maybe not. Maybe it'll turn east. Well, it didn't. It started to turn west. So as it started to come north toward us, there were a few key things that we wanted to check. What usually happens when hurricanes or bad storms come through? Power goes out. So we need to check our generators. We had our generators all checked, made sure they were fully fueled. Some of the other things that could possibly happen, lose your STL path. Some of our stations here in New Jersey, and we have 6 stations, 3 of them are co-located with their transmitter site, so we've got the best STL possible, a piece of copper wire. But others we use microwaves or T1s. So to be sure that all of those paths and all the alternate paths, ISDN, POTS lines, are all set up and together. Then we start asking, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if we lose the studio? So we took some remote gear out to the transmitter sites, along with our backup audio vault system. So if we needed to, we could put someone at the transmitter to continue to stay on the air. Those were some of the broad technical things we did. Other personnel-wise, we organized the staff, air staff, promotion staff, took volunteers, and just gathered the people together who were going to be here during the storm and the people after the storm, and tried to make the best use of all the staff that we could. We brought in food for them. We brought in water for them, places to sleep. If people would bring their own cots, if people had special dietary needs, they would bring their own food. So it really pulled together as quite the team effort to just make it all happen. Our vice president for the region, Dan Finn, just gave us a directive: stay on the air, provide content, do whatever you need to do that. So that's the way we pursued it.
Talk to me about the final few hours when you really had a good idea of where Sandy was going to hit, and even maybe plus or minus an hour, you knew when Sandy was going to hit. What's your thinking here in the final few hours? Sitting and waiting? Do you think, have I done everything I can at this point?
That's always a consideration. Have I done everything I can? What can still go wrong? There's a certain amount of guesswork involved. The preparation, the determination just to keep it on the air. It's something that, having grown up in broadcasting, I started in high school, so it's ingrained. Just to keep it on the air is what it's all about.
We were talking about that the other day when we were testing out Skype between us. You've been in broadcasting since your high school days, yeah?
Yeah. About 1978 is when I got started. A 10-watt FM station at Haverford High School in Havertown, Pennsylvania.
Wow. Yeah, that's not so different from me. Tom Ray, I'm sorry if I kept you from jumping in or something. Tom, did you get started in broadcasting in high school too? And you have, as a result, this notion that the station's got to stay on the air no matter what.
Oh, I started actually in my senior year of high school. I started at WDRC AM and FM in Hartford, which was the big station in the Hartford area, top 40 wise. And yeah, no, in those days when you got into the business, I mean, it was banged into your head. You keep this place on the air. You do what you have to do to make it work. You do what you have to do to keep content on the air, and you just rock and roll with it. And that's exactly how we approached Hurricane Sandy over at WOR.
That Keith and I were talking a couple days ago about this, and we were thinking about why is it that we have this sense that the most. I mean, I've put up actually with physical pain to my body in order to keep a station on the air, whether it was pumping diesel fuel, siphoning something that I shouldn't have been siphoning, or climbing a tower in a freezing rainstorm with some coveralls on, thermal coveralls to try to keep warm, and fingers that were just starting to freeze up. I've done these dumb things. I've done these things that were a little risky and certainly uncomfortable. Why do we have this sense of keep it on the air of all costs? Keith, what?
Well,
why do you? Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, still today we're licensed to serve the public, to serve in the public interest. But back in the days when Keith and I and you, Kirk, got into the business, it was taken really seriously that for emergency information, you're the link to the public, and that was ingrained in all of us, I think. And the only way you're going to fulfill that license obligation is to keep it on the air. There's also some other major differences between back in the days we started and today. If you look at applications, for example, on an FCC application back then, you had to prove financially you keep the station on the air. You had to tell them how many spare tubes you had, what your cash value of spare parts was, to prove to the commission that you were doing everything you could to keep that station on the air. They don't ask those questions today anymore. So
today, in fact, Keith and I were talking like it's today. I'm not saying broadcast engineers are like this, but there are people getting into the technicalities of broadcasting whose attitude is, your email doesn't work? Okay, we'll see if we can get it fixed tomorrow, maybe the next day. You can't do that with a station that's on the air, or at least that's not what we grew up with. It's not a matter. The stream's down. Okay, we'll put a trouble ticket in and get to that in the next 24 hours. No, we're going to fix it right now.
With streaming as it is now, that's more and more stations with their streaming is starting to get that same urgency, especially where there is a broadcast engineer more involved with keeping the streams up. Those are becoming more and more of a revenue source, so they are just as important. And it's simply that we, in the markets where they have it, the PPM to keep the PPM going as well as keeping it on the air. Losing your PPM is almost worse than being off the air.
Yeah, because you're still spending all the money, and yet you're not getting credit for it. The ad agencies don't know that you're not getting counted. No, really, I was present that day. Nah, paper says you weren't. Keith, tell me a little bit about where your stations are located. I know that the eye of the storm, didn't it hit just a bit northeast of Atlantic City, right on the Jersey Shore?
Yeah, what is considered right now ground zero is an area called Ortley Beach, which is a little bit south of WRAT, the RAT, which is licensed to Point Pleasant, New Jersey, and its studios and transmitter site are in Lake Como. And I have a station slightly south of that in Manahawkin, WJRZ Magic 100.1. And the eye of the storm came ashore pretty much between them.
Wow, that's pretty small. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Then throughout the rest of the state, we've got WMGQ and WCTC licensed to New Brunswick, New Jersey, at pretty much the center of the state. And in north central New Jersey, WMTR and WDHA in the Morristown area. So we cover about 100 miles, 120 miles across the state. And each one, the storm affected each one slightly differently, which was interesting.
Well, talk to me about the toughest situation that you had. Okay, so here's the storm. It's barreling in. You've got towers. You've got studios. I guess you've got generators ready. You've got some food supplies, maybe some cots ready for people. I should shut up asking questions and let you answer. But did people, were they ready to hunker down? Were they evacuated? What was it like in the worst of the situations?
In a couple of the areas, a couple of the towns, they were evacuating people from the townships. Lake Como was evacuated. Manahawkin is on the bay side. As you come in from the Atlantic Ocean, you have Long Beach Island, and there are towns there. Those were all evacuated. Then you come across Barnegat Bay and into towns like Manahawkin and Barnegat and Waretown. A lot of those coastal areas, people were being evacuated. We had staff who were ready to hunker down, and they were hunkered down. In a couple of cases, it was a skeleton crew, just 3 or 4 people. Others, there were 8 to 10 people, just ready to do whatever it was we needed to do, and it was quite interesting. WRAT's studio building is a metal building, and so during the height of the storm, I was standing inside, leaning against one of the inner walls, and just feeling it rock and sway. People talk about being up high in the Empire State Building or some other tall tower, and if you'll pardon the expression, looking into the toilet and seeing the water slosh around.
Yeah, sure.
That's being 70 stories up in the air. The water in the toilets at the Rat looked like Class 2 rapids.
Oh my!
I'm a kayaker, so it was amazing. So that was making me a little bit nervous being in that building in the height of the storm. But it stayed together. The roof stayed on. We were on generator power, and the Rat stayed on the air through the height of it.
I'm actually looking at the street view of WRAT. So you've got a tower right there. Now, is your transmitter site? I'm sorry if I missed it. Transmitter right there or not?
Yes, for the Rat, the transmitter site is right there.
Okay. And so what about going on? Oh, there's a satellite dish on the roof too. Is that still there?
Yeah, that's probably a much older satellite view. There was a large 6-foot dish up there, or I guess it was a 3-meter dish on the roof. We took that down before Irene last year.
Oh, okay. All right.
Another one of these 100-year storms that seems to be coming every couple of years.
Yeah. Hey, what about, do you have any weather instruments on the roof or on the tower? Anemometer, that kind of thing? No,
we were pretty much relying entirely on the internet for our weather information. Yeah. Getting some feeds from WCTC. We work closely with WeatherWorks, Frank Lombardo and his crew at WCTC, where we have our news department for the state, and also with Ion Weather up for the Morristown stations. And we were getting information from them for across the region.
Okay. Yeah, they're WCTC, and those guys are just a little bit north of you, and so Greater Media has a relationship with them to provide weather.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you're hunkered down at WRAT. Did you go off the air?
No. We stayed on in varying levels throughout the height of the storm, despite some challenges. At WJRZ in Manahawkin, we had a generator overheat. 5 hours after losing power, the generator overheated. And luckily,
what caused that, and what'd you do about it?
Well, it turned out to be. At first, we thought it was a failed fan clutch. Bill Clanton, my engineer at WJRZ, noticed that the fan wasn't turning properly. He started spraying the radiator down with a garden hose. That cooled the generator enough that it could come back on and run. And it ran that way for a few hours. While it was down, our UPS managed to keep the studios up enough that we didn't lose any airtime, which was incredible. While he was working on that, I was working on establishing a link from one of our other stations through a hotline, in order that if we were to lose the studio, we could put another station on the air to still continue to serve the public. A few hours later, after the UPS batteries had recharged, Bill shut the generator down, tightened the belts on it. It turned out to be just that the belts had come loose.
Okay.
So he tightened the belts, checked the fluids, and fired it back up, all in the time that the UPS batteries kept the studios online, so we didn't lose any airtime there.
Wow. Tom, does this sound like anything you were experiencing at the WOR transmitter site or at some New York studios?
Oh, yes. No, I was at the I was at the transmitter site, and the transmitter itself, we're out in the middle of the swamps out there in the Jersey Meadowlands. Now, you sit there and go, wait a minute, you're a New York station. The transmitter site's about 6 miles from Manhattan. Oh, it's a swamp. That part of New Jersey is, it's a swamp. What can I tell you? When we built the site, and the swamp level is, I think, about 3 or 4 feet above sea level, so it's low. 100-year flood stage is 9 feet. We built the transmitter site at 13. So, but of course, the transmitter site's built up, the towers and guy anchors are built up, and the road going out there. Excuse me, you caught me with a mouthful here. I'm finishing supper.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry. The show interrupts your day. I apologize.
No. The road going out there is also about 12 to 13 feet. So I didn't want to stay out there at night from the simple standpoint we didn't really know what was going to happen because, as you know, as a meteorologist, Kirk, one of the worst places to be in a hurricane is in the in the northwest quadrant, because the storm rotates counterclockwise, pulls in the moisture from the sea, and then drops it in the northwest quadrant, and that's exactly where we were located in New York City. So I went to a hotel when dark came, because very bluntly, I didn't want to be out there figuring out how I was either going to get out or how I was going to be swimming in the middle of the night. But I went to the hotel, and I had the radio on. I put the radio on, and the room they put me in, I was looking at the towers. Interesting to note that at one point I heard a crash, and when I went downstairs, something became airborne and went right through the front window of the hotel. And outside the room they put me in, there were 3 flagpoles. In the morning, there were only 2 flags. Don't know what happened to the third one. It wasn't there. But so I had the radio on, and I heard power dip, drop a couple of times. The transmitter drop came right back up. Transmitter drop came right back up, and then all of a sudden, we went away. And I glanced out the window, and the tower lights were out. And I said, "Okay, 1,000 to 1,000 at 15." Bang! We popped right back on the air, and I said, "Okay." Looked out, tower lights were on. Logged into the transmitter site and took a look at things. Full power. I said, "Okay, not a problem." And about an hour, that was about 8:30 at night. About 9:30, 9:45, all of a sudden, I heard them on the air say, "Gee, it's got awful dark in here all of a sudden." Consolidated Edison, Con Ed, who's the power company in New York, pulled power to the building. What many people watching and listening probably don't realize is that, Manhattan's got all the big buildings. Manhattan is got Wall Street. Manhattan is where things happen. But Manhattan's an island. It's surrounded on 4 sides by water. And it's divided into 4 evacuation zones. Now, where the WR building is, we're down, if somebody pulls up a map, we are about a block and a half north of Wall Street, right next door to Trinity Church, right down at the end of Manhattan. So we're in a low area.
Yeah.
The evacuation zone A comes up right to the back door of the building. The building itself is an evacuation zone B, but the Con Ed feed comes from evacuation zone A. So they pulled power to protect themselves because, if their transformer vault gets inundated, that could be a spectacular fireworks show.
Sure.
So we, and we just kept chugging along because we have UPSs in the studios, and all of a sudden, "Oh yeah, lights are on," and I picked up the phone and called in. "Yeah, we're on generator." "Okay, fine." The generator came up. Life was good. And about an hour later, we went silent. Well, sitting there with the computer, I logged back in and went blink and flipped us over. We were sitting on one of the fiber links. I flipped us over to the one of the microwave receivers, and sure enough, we came back up. The phone company equipment in the basement of the building, apparently Verizon hasn't changed the batteries recently, because an hour in, bang, it went away, took down everything, all the fiber and everything else. So now at the studios, we had no phone lines. We had no T1s. We had no, at this point, don't ask me how, we still had an internet feed. That went away an hour later. So all we had was cable TV. When about, well, yeah, exactly. No, but we have a deal with WNBC TV Channel 4 to use their audio if need be. So what we did was we put them on overnight. And John Gambling and the crew came back in the morning, and they had TV, so they could watch what was going on, and they could read the scroll on the screen, the closed captioning, and they were still able to give information. Well, about 7:30 in the morning, cable TV went dead. So now we're on the air, we're giving information, but we have none coming in. At that point, we made a decision. We put Channel 4 on the air. They called me. I said, "Oh, yeah," I said, because I left it up. I took, like Keith said, I took our remote equipment out to the transmitter site, and I built a studio. And what I did was, before I left the site, I had left Channel 4's audio up on the board, and had it all set up. So all I had to do was log in and go click and put it on, which is exactly what happened.
Oh,
at that point, I drove. Yeah, well, at that point, I drove to the site, and the hotel I was in was on Route 17, which is around the corner from the transmitter site, and you drive by Polito Avenue. Now, Polito Avenue is where the 1010 Winds transmitter site is, and when I looked at Polito Avenue, I saw a lake. I didn't see a road. I saw a lake, and that's when I punched up 1010 on the radio, and 1010 Winds was off the air. The water came up over the bases of their towers, which, of course, took them off the air. I understand WLIB, who is around the corner from them, had 20-some-odd inches of water in their transmitter room. So needless to say, they've got transmitters on order. A little further down, a little further south of all of us, is the combined transmitter site of WMCA and WNYC. 3 towers that literally sit in the water. The storm surge destroyed the wood catwalk that went out there. Not quite certain at this point if they had a tuning house that kind of got moved off the foundation. It looked like it in the pictures. But they had 18 inches of water in the transmitter room, so both those stations are now on with borrowed 1 kilowatt transmitters. At WMCA is 5K, WNYC is 10K day, 1K night. So they are using lower power transmitters right now to stay on the air, because obviously you get 18 inches of water in the transmitter site, time to replace the transmitters. But what was interesting in New York is about 2 days later, the Con Ed turned power back on. And when they did that, of course, the fiber came back up, our phone lines came back, our internet service came back the next day. That I'm not sure where AT&T's point of presence is in Manhattan for that. But oh boy, I just got derailed. So that all came up, and we spent an extra day. What happened in the interim? We needed a studio. So we borrowed a studio from our new soon-to-be owner's Clear Channel up on 6th Avenue. We went up there, but now there's this little issue called getting audio to the transmitter site, because that whole area out where the transmitter is in New Jersey is fed by a SLIC from the phone company. And for those who don't know what a SLIC is, it stands for Subscriber Line Interface Circuit. In your neighborhood, you probably see a phone company box. In this case, it's actually in a manhole, which didn't flood. But of course, when power gets pulled, there's a battery pack in there, and after the batteries die, well, you're out of luck. And I had no phone lines at the transmitter. I've got ISDN and everything. I had no phone lines at the transmitter site. The only thing that was up was fiber. The ISDN isn't on the fiber. So I'm scratching my head saying, what do I do? Well, we have the WR radio network, and we have a relationship with ABC Satellite Services, now Cumulus Satellite Services. I picked up the phone and called them and said, can you guys configure a quick satellite channel for me? And they said, already done. Here's the ISDN number attached to it. And I said, okay. I called the Clear Channel Studios and said, dial dial this number. So to get back on the air, we used a satellite link. Now, the funny part is, if I stuck my head out the door of the building and looked, I could see the top of the building they were in. That's 6 miles away. My link was 46,000 miles.
That's right. 20.
What I was going to say before is, we're lucky at WOR. Most of our phone circuits are on fiber. 98%. A good portion of the tenants in our building don't have phone lines yet. We're talking end of October. It's now the end of November. The West Street Central Office and the Broad Street Central Office, the cable vaults got inundated. We're talking, these are under the street. They're 15 feet high. The one at West Street is 15 feet high, 90 feet long, 200 feet wide. It was full because what happened was the pumps couldn't quite keep up with the water. It inundated the air pumps, which keep the lines full of air. To keep the copper cable dry. Those quit. The water kept rising, and the pumps just couldn't keep up with it, and that was the end of it. Verizon right now is scrambling to replace upwards of 90 miles of cable from those two cable vaults from those two central offices because all of the cable got wet and it is all ruined.
Oh. I don't know if...
I was going to say, these are cable vaults that were in place.
Can bring this up. There's Tom, you gave us a link from a website called The Verge.
Right, and they're I believe it's an industry an industry site for something like telecommunications. They went down into into one of the cable vaults to show you what's there. I mean, there are splicing blocks. I mean, they opened up the splices, and they're just trying to get some people some service back, and there's stuff hanging in midair. Right now, they're in the process of scrambling. They're pulling fiber to all of the buildings in Lower Manhattan. I've seen a parade of Verizon guys into and out of our building because they're installing new equipment downstairs to terminate the new fiber.
Sure.
There's fiber in the building, but they're pulling new fiber in to accommodate everything. It's really a mess.
Hey, wow. And then are they going to be able to pull out the old stuff, or is it just going to lay there dead? Any idea?
My guess is they're going to cut it out because I know in the cable vault, that video that the link is to, and what we might be able to do is post that up on the Twitch site if we can't bring it up here.
We'll put it
they've already started cutting these. I mean, we're talking cables this big around.
Yeah, they're huge.
They've started cutting them off in the cable vault, and they're pulling them out of the cable vault. I don't know if they're going to pull them out of the street, but I'm sure that at the buildings they're going to cut it and pull out so they can use that opening for fiber. Here we go.
We're showing a few of the still pictures, and there's the part of the video right there. This is from the website called The Verge, VERGE, and we'll put a link to this page, which includes this video, beautifully shot, and probably with one of those new DSLRs or maybe just a good video camera. But there's Chris Levendos, and we'll put that on so folks can watch that at their leisure. But you can see there's miles of cable just in these vaults. Oh my goodness. It's just amazing.
But at the WR transmitter site, the water level was 10.5 feet.
And the site was 13.
Right, and the site's at 13, so I've never seen the water that high out there. But what I did note that was interesting, because as Keith alluded to, last year we had Hurricane Irene come through. With Irene, the surge came up. That came at our site. It came to about 8.5 feet at that point. But it was interesting because we're tidal. That 8.5 feet stayed there for about 4 or 5 days before it started dropping. There was no change in tide. There was no change in level. With this storm, with Hurricane Sandy, it was up to the very top of the culvert that's out in front of the transmitter building. 3 hours after the storm ended, it was already 3 feet lower. I don't get it. I have no idea. I have no idea why or how, or I just don't know. But it was like I was actually expecting to see it come up higher, and I walked outside and said, "If it comes up higher, oh man!" And I looked, and they said, "It's lower." I don't get it. So
we're talking.
We stayed on the air.
We're talking to Tom Ray. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Tom. I keep interrupting you. Go ahead. Finish up.
Oh, no, not a problem. I was just going to say the last thing I'll say is we operated on generator at the transmitter for 4 days. We went through 2,000 gallons of diesel. So I had to get a diesel truck in. That
was a challenge.
Over here. Up in the northern part of Jersey, it wasn't that bad because while they got hit, it wasn't like you guys down in the southern part. But the guy showed up. It was like 2,000 gallons here, please. And he filled up the tank, and the generator just kept running. And 7 hours later, we went back to commercial power, and we've been on commercial power ever since. So,
I'm just curious. When the guy shows up and delivers $2,000 of diesel fuel, do you give him a credit card? How does that work?
In this case, yes, because we hadn't had any fuel deliveries at that site for I don't know how long, because the power has been so reliable at that site. I think maybe we were on a total of 2 to 3 hours a year on that generator. This is the first time it ran almost 120 hours, and he showed up. I gave him a corporate card that was almost $9,000. It was like, here you go, fill it up, please.
Hey, get double miles, and go on a trip to Europe.
Probably should.
Keith, how about you? Were you out with the credit card giving it to diesel fuel people?
Diesel, propane, flood cleanup people, whoever came by to do service. I was having the corporate credit card out in order to get things done. Fuel delivery was a challenge.
Tell me.
Both propane and diesel. Diesel we did a little bit better with. We didn't require quite as much of it. Other than at WDHA, where my engineer up there, Jason, was because the power lines were down, he was hand carrying 5-gallon jerry cans of diesel a quarter mile up the hill to get to the transmitter site. So and he was doing it. It was burning about 25 gallons a day, so he was making 5 trips a day for about a week. JCP&L finally returned power up there the following Saturday when they realized that Sprint Nextel, their cell phone carrier, was on the tower as well.
Yeah.
Well, they realized that they'd get their phones back. We got commercial power back. one of the little ironies of the storm.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Years and years ago, maybe a decade or two ago, it seemed like broadcasters were the only mass communications link. And now there's wireless phone companies, which are a huge communication link, in a different style. But so you're saying that when it was realized the importance of the cell site, that's when you got the fuel? Is that what I understood you to say?
Yeah, that's when we got our utility power back.
Oh, utility power. Okay.
Utility power. They came and set their pole and cleared the wires, and in a couple of hours, we got our utility power back. Now, we use 3 different utility companies, Atlantic City Electric down south, JCP&L, and PSE&G. And they all had different response times, different ways of dealing with things. In Atlantic City Electric, we got power back in Manahawk and Waretown within about 3 days. A lot of the other sites were 5 to 7 days. The WCTC transmitter site was 15 days. So it was on generator for a little over 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay. I want to talk about generators when we come back. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. And by the way, you're listening or watching to This Week in Radio Tech, episode number 146. This is a show where we talk about radio technology, and on today's episode, we're talking with Keith Smeal of Greater Media, New Jersey. And Keith is the Director of Technical Operations for Greater Media in New Jersey. They were hit hard right in or near the eye of Hurricane Sandy a month or so ago. So we wanted to get Keith on to kind of give us a wrap-up of what had happened, what was exciting, what was difficult, what was painful, what was what they planned for. And when we come back from our commercial, I want to get a little wrap-up sense from Keith about what plans worked out and what plans in the future might be different. Not that you can plan for every emergency, but what things might be different. But I want to show you something right now. This is a couple things from Telos that hope I can hold these up in the camera's eye here for you. A couple things. We'll show you first of all. This is a Telos VSET 6. This is a telephone controller for a talk show system. This is the new line of controllers from Telos. If you've watched This Week in Radio Tech very much, you've probably seen this one before, or its big brother, the VSET 12. The VSET 12 will handle 12 lines and has 2 color screens on it. This is the VSET 6. It's designed to let you answer and put on the air 6 phone lines, and it has 1 color VGA screen. And basically, this is a little computer. It runs Linux in this thing, and it's just as cool as can be. It has an IP address, of course. The software is specifically written for it, and it's connected just by 1 cable. There's not a separate power cable. It's powered by power over Ethernet. So if you plug this into a PoE switch, well, it's got power automatically. If you don't have a PoE switch, then you can use this, which comes with every one of these. This is a power inserter for power over Ethernet. Just AC power in there, and then you have data, Ethernet going in and Ethernet plus power coming back out, and that goes to the telephone. Now, the next thing, le piste de la résistance. We have the new, just about to be shipped from Telos, HX6. Now, if you're familiar with, from Telos, our phone system known as the 1X6, that's been around for almost 20 years now. The 1X6 is a 6-line, they have to be POTS lines, a 1 hybrid phone system. You can add a second hybrid to it if you want to, and it will accommodate up to 2 controllers. It's a little bit difficult to do call screening on the 1X6. Well, the HX6 is like a new big brother with the latest technology. It has 2 telephone hybrids in it, and these are the latest Telos research and technology quality of phone hybrids. It'll also handle 6 POTS lines, or it'll handle 3 ISDN lines, and each ISDN line having 2 talk paths. So 6 lines of ISDN, 6 lines of POTS, either one that you want. And what I like about this thing is it does have the ability, it's how it connects to its controller, is via Ethernet. So on the back of the HX6, there is an Ethernet jack. It also says LiveWire on it. You can run LiveWire audio in and out of the HX6 if you want to, but it also has the full complement of audio input and output jacks, XLRs for analog or AES, audio input and caller audio output, plus a program on hold audio input as well, and some contact closures to give you things like light ringing and to control other functions. So to connect it up to the VSET 6, pretty simple matter. Right now, this is just connected through the power inserter and then right to the VSET 6. So you don't even need a separate Ethernet switch to hook 1 controller up to the new HX6 talk show system. On the front, the HX6 has this really pretty OLED screen and then a couple of LED bar graph meters to show audio levels at a glance in and out. So the HX6, that's a new 6-line, 2 hybrid talk show system from Telos. It starts to ship actually right about now. We're just wrapping up the manual and getting the final version of software in it to start shipping them out. It's very cool. It's based on a lot of the same technology that is in our big VX phone system. You can check it out on the web at telos-systems.com and look for the HX6 product page, and you can read all about it. I'm excited about this. I'm going to be producing a video about how to make it work and get a quick start on setting yours up. Also, if you have been looking at getting something like the Telos NX6, which is a 6-line system, but it's bigger and it's a bit older technology than this is. The new HX6 will definitely save you money over the NX6. So a lot of 6s involved there. Check it out on the web, telos-systems.com. And I thank Telos for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All righty, back in the show now. Keith.
Hey, Kirk.
We're gonna. Yes, sir. Yes, Tom.
But before you ask Keith your question, I was just wondering, there are more than 3 6s in those Telos products, aren't there?
Yeah, I think so. Why?
Because I didn't want you to be known as the mark of the devil. Telos products are great.
Well, we have some competitors who say we are. Hey, well, thanks, Tom. So, Keith, we were going to talk about how your plans worked out, and then what did you discover after all this is over now, and you're back on the air, and things are mostly back to normal. What are your thoughts afterwards?
Well, to get through this storm, it it's one of those cases where it's much better to be lucky than good. With some of the issues we had, just luck, being in the right place at the right time. But it did expose some places for improvement. Not during the storm, but not long after. A central office in the New Brunswick area lost all its power. So at WCTC and WMGQ, we lost our T1s. Cable went down, so we lost that as our backup internet. We were able to get phones, and we had a few POTS lines. So between POTS lines and just using a 3G wireless brick, we were able to get at least some basic internet in order to get information in and out. So we're going to look at improving the internet and phone systems, the networks within the region. For example, reworking our MPLS network and also looking at a redundant MPLS network through VPNs over cable for backup to give us multiple paths. That's region wide. We're also going to be looking at improving the alternate paths and switching at our transmitter sites in order to get, if we lose a studio, to be able to get something else on the air. We had really roop-a-dooped some things together. Luckily, we didn't necessarily need those, but we're going to harden those systems in the future. The WCTC transmitter site is probably someplace where we're going to make a fair number of physical changes. It was flooded for the third time in 12 years. Hurricane Floyd put 18 inches of water in it. Irene put 18 inches of water. And Tom earlier was talking about the difference between this storm and Hurricane Irene last year. I observed the same thing. Between those storms and the nor'easter of 2007, looking at the river gauges for the Raritan River, I had pretty much determined where, by watching the river gauge, we would start to get in trouble. That didn't happen with this storm. With the way the storm came in, to backtrack, most of those storms were from heavy rainfall. So the river would start to come up west and north of here, up at the headwaters, and the waters would rise as the watershed filled. This storm, it was entirely storm surge and the high tide. Thankfully, the storm sped up, and the eye of the storm hit at about 5 p.m., as I recall. High tide was supposed to be 11 p.m. I think the damage for the entire region would have been much worse had that storm not sped up and been 6 hours early. So in that respect, we got lucky. The WCTC transmitter site for this storm, as I think I said, had 27 inches of water in it. So luckily, before the storm, I had boosted some of the equipment up to at least 18 inches, the previous line. So we're going to be raising those up even more, raising the electric up above 30 or 36 inches, possibly raising the ATU. The ATU was filled with water, and our generator was about half submerged. So we're going to look at jacking that up 18 to 24 inches.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. Things like that, hard to plan for. You plan for what people say should be okay. Water should, on a 100-year basis, should ever get above this level. And then, some storm comes along that makes a mockery of the 100-year rule or whatever it may be. Man. So these are things that you learned and things that you're going to be changing in the future. Anything you're going to change about how you deploy people, how you plan for staffing?
Yeah, that was one of the things that also came out of this. After the event, we did a number of post-mortems. I got together with the staffs at the different locations. And for this storm, kind of based on Irene. Now, Irene came through and there were some issues, and everybody came through it unscathed. So perhaps we took this storm a little bit lightly in terms of that type of preparation. Though we had people on site, well, I don't know if anybody was fully prepared for the size and the power of this storm. But each pocket had kind of done their own preparation within itself. Going forward in the future, more regionally, we're going to share ideas. We're going to talk about what each location needs, make better use of the resources that are shared across the region. as I mentioned earlier, the WCTV news department to do more updates using them. And it's and to use that news department more for a statewide broad overview, because these stations are local stations or suburban radio. They really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in that neighborhood. A big part of the content was taking phone calls from listeners. What are you seeing out your front door? What's happening in your neighborhood? Where are you? And between that and getting the local officials on, we found that we were able to get them on, but I felt like we were always playing catch up. So we're going to try to forge better relationships with local officials, the county OEMs, local police departments, the mayors in all of the surrounding towns, so that we're much higher on the hit parade when something like this happens. It's all about communications, this business that we're in, and for us to do more proactive reaching out than to wait for them to come to us.
Sure seems like radio has, I hate to say rested on its laurels, but we assume that people know that radio is the best, fastest way to get information out to a large audience. And it still is, despite things like Twitter. And hey, Hurricane Sandy, made Twitter wrong to say made Twitter come alive. I mean, Twitter's always buzzing, but a lot of people have been getting information from sources like Twitter and even Facebook, Twitter being very portable. But you don't have, I guess it's good and bad, you don't have a source of responsibility with crowdsourced services like Twitter. With a radio broadcaster and a responsible news organization like you have at a lot of radio and TV stations, you have people who will put the information together in a way that makes in a sensible way and present it to the public in a sensible way. Whereas in Twitter, you're dealing with just a whole lot of random information. Might be good, might be useful in some ways, but you're also dealing with, like in my own Twitter feed, there probably 90% of the stuff on my own Twitter feed is stuff that I don't care about or wouldn't need to know. Whereas if I'm in an emergency and one of my local stations here in Nashville, like WWTN, is talking about it, well, I'm going to be tuned into that, or to one of the TV stations. Do you find that is there any change in attitude or any reinvigoration about providing concise news and information as a broadcaster in this age where Twitter and Facebook are readily available?
I think people are. I think that, our staffs are much more aware of the responsibility to provide this information, and they did a great job. They really did. As this developed, while they didn't know, we didn't completely break format anywhere. Instead of doing promotions and contests, it was talk. Sure, we might play sure, we'd play a record. I'm showing how long I've been in this business. But then you get back into the talk with either the public or the local official, and just saying, as I said, what's going on, what's news, where do you need help? Well, and one of the things that came out of our group is everybody talking about we're all in this together, and between the radio station and the public, we were all in it together. And I think that gave people, the public, a great sense of companionship. And it also, I think, reinforced the importance of radio. I was at a disaster planning seminar a few days ago, and one of the presenters commented that to a person in their office as they lost power. Well, she had been talking with one of the TV news directors in Philadelphia, saying, it was great that you guys were on the air and doing all of your reporting. I thought your coverage was great. And he said, yeah, but nobody could see us. Nobody had power. So she went around her office and everybody said, oh, we had the radio on. So that was an interesting thing to take away. As much talk as there is about all this other technology, radio really is a constant. And it's still the one way that people can get information
when they have almost no other way. Here, my office right now, where I'm sitting right now, is in the basement of my house, and just a few yards from here, in our basement, we have a storm cellar. That's a wine cellar, okay, but it's where we go when there's a tornado warning. That's where we go. And you know what? I don't have cable TV brought in there, and the cable TV might go out. The internet might very well go out because it comes along with the cable TV. The one thing I know that will work in there is my radio. And here in Nashville, we've got 40 different radio stations to choose from, and probably 5 or 6 of them we'll be providing news coverage if there's a bad storm or some other civil emergency going on or weather emergency going on. So, all three of us here, Tom, me, you, Keith, we're all believers in what radio can do for people. And sometimes in chat rooms or in talking to folks who are, real adopters of social media and new technology, a lot of them tend to put down radio and say, "Oh, radio's forgotten. You don't need that anymore. You got Twitter." Well, you better keep something around where you can listen to the radio, because there's going to be some times when that's the only source or the best source of concise and intelligent information that's formatted and put together in a way that you can use it effectively.
And the funny thing, Kirk, is that those same people who sit there and will say that radio is old-fashioned and it's going by the wayside are the first ones that turn the radio on when they have a problem. But what the storm pointed out in the New York area, these things are great. These smartphones, they're wonderful. I like this thing. It's a lot of fun. But when the power went out and the battery packs ran out, it started becoming a crapshoot as to whether or not we could make a cell phone call or not. So, okay, so you can pull up the audio stream of the station on it. Doesn't do you any good when the cell site goes out. You can get a text message from somebody telling you that the water level over in Queens is rising to a certain point. Doesn't do you any good when that cell tower goes out. We have the advantage, and not that the phone company or whomever doesn't have the wherewithal or the technical ability to keep these things on the air. They're not designed that way. We designed to stay on the air. We have generators with 5 days of fuel. We have more than one transmitter at the site. And we have people who have the ingenuity. God forbid a tower fell down. What would you do? Well, in our case at WR, we'd switch to a single tower at a reduced power, but we'd still be on the air. If all 3 towers came down, well, as soon as it was safe to do so, we'd string a wire someplace and we'd get back on the air and match it. It's you don't get that with cell sites. You don't get that with the internet. You don't get that with other things. We're the guys who come through every time, and that doesn't go out of style.
That's true.
Having our own towers here in New Jersey, we like many tower owners, lease space. I think only one of the cell providers at one location has their own generator, and it was 2, 3, 4 days later that generator started to show up at some of these other locations.
I wonder, do cell companies, what pressure, if any, do they feel about providing service during and after a storm? What pressure does AT&T or Verizon or Sprint or T-Mobile feel to make sure that some number of their sites are powered? I'm sure they've got PR statements about this, but we know from going through these storms and events that many of the cell sites are down. Any idea how they actually view this?
Kirk, I can tell you that in Manhattan, while certain cell sites were down, and at the West Street and the Broad Street central offices, they had those cable problems, which of course meant they couldn't feed out to the cell sites. At least outside the West Street office, which I see all the time, Verizon had a portable cell site that they deployed out there the following day, so they took it rather seriously. They had an army of people out there pulling cables, pumping things out, filling sandbags, and they had 2 or 3 of these portable cell sites. They're trucks with a mast, with kind of like an ENG truck we see for television, with cell antennas on it, and they had cables running, cables and fiber running into and out of the building, and that's how they provided service down in that part of Manhattan. So they took it pretty seriously, and the problem with some place like Manhattan is they can't really put a generator in a lot of these places. But outside the city, there's no reason they couldn't buy a generator, and very bluntly, I think that's cheap insurance.
Yeah, should be. Hey, you know what? Before we wrap this up, there's a subject that we wanted to talk to Keith about, and Keith wanted to talk about, and that's about. I asked Keith, but when we got ready to do the show, so Keith, what are you passionate about? What subject, what niche part of radio engineering do you really enjoy talking about? And Keith said, "I'm a generalist. I enjoy learning about and doing everything that has to do with broadcasting." So Keith, if you would, tell us a bit about that and your thoughts about, as engineers, being generalists.
It's that phrase that people use all the time of jack of all trades, master of none. People I meet will ask me what I do, and I tell them I work for a radio station. And the first question is always, well, are you on the air? Well, no, there's more to radio than being on the air. And I tell them about being an engineer. And I often say I'm the manager of the miscellaneous department. There are so many things that fall between the cracks that you can't necessarily put into one department or another. And so many of them just comes down to solving problems. Things come up. How do we deal with this? What's this? I often find in my mailbox at work bills that I've never seen before, but the person sorting the mail didn't know who to go to, so it winds up in my mailbox.
Okay.
So
give it to Keith. He'll take care of it.
I tell people I deal with everything from toilets to tower lights. And it really is that way. If there's a plumbing problem, I might not have to put the new wax ring in, but I at least have to call the plumber. I don't have to climb the tower to change the tower light. So, 20 years ago when my knees weren't quite so bad, I might have. So it makes every day a little bit different. My wife constantly tells me, and she was, let me say hi to my wife. She was a blessing through the storm. She was able to take care of everything at home. And by not having to worry about her at home, it helped me do my job better. So I can't say enough about that. If every engineer is as blessed as I am, then, go forth. My train of thought just derailed, and it's usually just engage anyway.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about at home, because keeping things on track at home can be awfully difficult if at home has no power. What was your home situation like there? I've had this nasty case of survivor's guilt for the past month. We didn't even lose power. My goodness.
Other than a few tree branches from the neighbor's trees in the yard, there was no damage to the house. So we really got through unscathed. And I took out an insurance policy after Irene. I went out and bought a generator and put in a transfer switch. So it was just one of those corollaries to Murphy's Law. You take out that insurance policy and you don't need it the next time.
So speaking of being a generalist, you have some engineers who you supervise, and I'm sure you're in charge of assigning them what they're going to be doing, or helping point them in the right direction. What's your advice to your engineers about what you need to learn about? What expertise do you need to get? Or are you also such a believer in being a generalist? And by the way, I was big on that too. When I was a contract engineer full-time, I had sometimes up to 4 employees, and I tried to help them explain, look, you're not going to receive specific training on a Harris transmitter, for example, or a BE transmitter. You're a generalist. You're going to know about both of them, so that you can fix either kind. If somebody still has a cart machine out there in the field, I'm not going to give you a day of training on a cart machine. You got to read the manual, figure out how these things work, and play with them enough to where you figure out the solenoid is sticky, or there's hum in the output. So let's look at the capacitors in the power supply if there's not a ground loop, that kind of thing. So how do you deal with your engineers, and what's your advice to them, and how do you try to point them in the right direction?
I think the biggest thing is just to when faced with a problem, it's what they often give you in emergency training and first aid training. Stop, think, react. Take the think time. Look at a problem, break it down. There are multiple ways of addressing a problem. Some of it's intuitive, some of it's conceptual, some of it is simply, some of the best advice I ever got very early in my career was the concept of divide and conquer. I was about to go, I was working part-time at WIOQ in Philadelphia, and I was working for Ken Tankel, and I was about to go off into and take a full-time job in a little town called Bainbridge, Georgia, my first full-time job right out of college. And I was asking Ken for advice, and he said, you know, when you're dealing with a transmitter, they're very logical. Break it down into small pieces. Cut it, you know, figure out figure out what will work too, and just use that divide and conquer. And when all else fails, pick up the phone and call the factory. They know these boxes. You don't have to figure everything out from scratch. So
that's true.
So that's one of the things I tell my people. You know, you don't have to recreate the wheel. Call support, and as you learn things, don't just learn them by rote. As you were saying before, you know, you're not going to get training on BE transmitters and training on Harris transmitters. Learn the concepts. Be able to apply what you learned over here to this other piece of equipment. Signal flow. How do you deal with signal flow? Think of it as a river. It's one of the, and it's going to go from point. It's going to start somewhere and end somewhere, and it's going to usually flow in one direction. I find that often confuses people who come into broadcast engineering from IT. Some of them have a little bit of difficulty grasping that concept, but I try to teach them how to apply it, and again, how to break things down, the input versus the output, and how it all just connects together.
Well, I think this applies to so many things in life. First radio station I ever worked at was a public radio station, and it was also a station where they were the flagship station for the Eastern Kentucky University Colonels. So they played all the football games. And I was going to work one Saturday, so I had to know, how do I get the feed from the stadium to be on the air? And so one of the other disc jockeys came in and says, well, you put a patch cord from this hole to this hole, and you throw this switch on the board, and you throw this switch on the board, and then you go to fader number 10, you turn it to program, and you turn it up. I said, okay, I can do that, but what did I just do? Well, the guy showing me had no idea why that worked. He just knew that that's what he was supposed to do. So I had the sense, look, if there's a problem with, if I do all this and it doesn't work, what do I do then? And he had no idea. So I, waved my hand and called the engineer over, and asked him, and he ran through the same thing with me. Like, I couldn't understand anything better than that. He showed me, well, you go to this hole, and you throw this switch, and no, tell me what I'm doing, because I didn't know what a patch bay was. And so he very kindly explained, well, I'm glad you want to know. You're actually taking audio from here, and you're bringing it down to, and you could put it over here or over here or over here, but most everybody just puts it right here. And this is the different inputs on the board. So, this whole world of knowledge started to open up. And then I realized it doesn't have to come into fader number 10 or pot number 10. It could come into number 9 if I wanted. If I want to get really wild and crazy, I could bring it into number 9. So this kind of curiosity, I think, is just excellent, and it's got to be nurtured. So when people ask questions, if it's the right kind of person that you got to give them the rote answer, okay, fine, give them the rote answer. But if you can nurture people into learning more and being curious, I just think that's a great thing, and you grow better people that way.
Yeah, different people learn different ways, and what you're talking about is certainly I think they call it the guided discovery method of teaching. There is a learning by rote, there is a lecturing, there's self-discovery, guided discovery, and a few others that I remember from a training class at one point, but I can't recall them now. But so you've got to try to figure out somebody's learning style, where their strengths are, and then teach to those styles. A otherwise, it's sometimes it's just talking into the wind. You can talk all you want, but they're not necessarily going to understand. It's the same concept of playing to your audience. Tailor your message to your audience.
Hey, guys, we got to wrap the show up. Tom, are you still there? Or did we put you to sleep? Did I put you to sleep?
Oh, sorry. No, I'm still here.
Every time I ask. Hey, Tom, you got any last minute comments? We got to scoot out of here.
No, not really. I mean, this storm kind of showed how to be creative. I mean, we had people actually holding cell phones up to the microphone when the phones went out to get phone calls on the air. Something they never asked me about. They just did it on their own, which was great. You get to learn. It was a learning experience. I mean, it's quite the thing to be in the transmitter building when the building is shaking. So,
wow. Did you have any fear that the building was going to come down, or a wall was going to cave in, or the roof was going to get pulled off?
No, the wind up in the New York City area wasn't that bad. It was more the storm surge that was the problem. So that wasn't a big concern. But like I said, my big concern at night was if that water comes up at high tide and ends up starting to come into the building. I don't want to be here in the dark. That's why I went to the hotel. Yeah. So,
true. Hey guys, I want to thank you both for being here and participating. Learned a lot here, and Keith, it's great to meet you by Skype, and I hope I get to see you again. Maybe we'll get together at some greater media function when we can, break bread or have a cup of coffee with you and me and Milford. That'd be just awesome.
I'd look forward to that.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. That's Keith Smeal, the Director of Technical Operations for Greater Media in New Jersey. Also, Tom Ray, one of our regular co-hosts, has been with us on the show today. Tom, thank you for taking now an hour and 20 minutes out of your day. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, Kirk. And before we go, I'd just like to mention to those who are listening and watching who are hams, this weekend on December 1st, the Orange County Amateur Radio Club is going to be holding SantaNet on the air on 3920 and 7200 from 15:30 hours local time here in New York, 15:16, which is 1930 UTC, to 21:30 UTC. Santa gets on the radio and talks to kids, and each kid gets a QSL card, which will be sent to the license holder of the person whose license they're using. So if you can tune in, join in the fun. We do it at a local grocery store that actually sells Christmas trees outside in their greenhouse, and we also talk to the kids on site with on 2 meters, and they have a blast. The club members show up; they all dress as elves, Rudolph, you name it. We have a great old time. So if you can join us on the air, please do so.
All right, and if you have a link that describes any of that, Tom, send it to me, and I'll make sure it gets in the show notes at thisweekinradiotech.com.
You bet.
All right, super. All right, and thanks to Telos, our sponsor, the Telos HX6, a new 6-line 2 hybrid phone system that's just got the latest telephone technology. Make your caller sound great. Check it out on the web at telos-systems.com. It's been a great show. This has been episode number 146. We've got Mike Durow coming up on a future show. I've gotten in touch with Mike. He's delighted to be on This Week in Radio Tech, so we're going to get Mike Durow on a future show, and that's going to be a fantastic show. Be with us. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, folks.
That's all the bandwidth we can pill for this week. Another twit has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech.
Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show.
Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here.
Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission.
Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango.
Signing off. Okay.